ESBR Boxing. You join us here. We are in big fight breakdown mode. Myself, Gregory Doyle, and Elliot Stott. We are here to talk about the upcoming heavyweight fight between Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte that's taking place at the O2 Arena on the 12th of August. Lads, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for discussing this. Before we get into it, I've just got a few things to cover off. I'm just going to do a quick kind of like summary really of the fight. I suppose for those of you that, those fans that may not necessarily be aware, but obviously most of them will. So it'll be a quick summary. So the guys have fought twice before, 2009 in the amateurs. Dillian Whyte won that. He put Anthony Joshua down at that point. They fought again in the pros, the British title. That was back in 2015, with Joshua stopping Dillian Whyte on that occasion. Coming into this fight, Joshua's got a record of 25-3 with 22 KOs. Obviously, most recent time out, he had a fairly questionable victory over Jermaine Franklin. It was a dominant victory, but questionable in the fact that it wasn't the performance that everyone expected. And he's coming off the back of that with two losses to Usyk, credible losses, obviously, given the talent that Usyk is. Dillian Whyte, his career has been, I suppose, depending on which way you're sitting, fairly questionable throughout. But he's got 29-3 record with 19 KOs. Comes into this fight as well, having fought Jermaine Franklin, which was a much closer fight. Some people thought it went Franklin's way, other people thought it went Whyte's way, but Whyte got the decision and comes to this. Obviously, previous to that, got stopped by Tyson Fury. Gents, we're going to break down this fight now, the stages they're at in their career. I'm going to come to you both as you give your answer to this first question. Obviously, let everyone know how you're doing if you're well. But we're going to start off really with a simple question, which I'm addressed to you, Gregory, first, and that is, do you think this fight, or take the pro ranks, take the amateurs out of it, but do you think that this fight now is closer on paper, potentially, than the 2015 fight, or do you not agree with that statement?
Elliot, first of all, just thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I think it's closer. I think that both guys might not be what they once were. It's very difficult to say with Joshua. There's a bit of a transition period going on there, but to answer your question, I think that this could possibly be a tighter fight than it was back then.
Elliot, stop. Obviously, Joshua stopped Dillian Whyte in the 7th round in that fight back in 2015. British titles, I've said, Commonwealth, WBC International Heavyweight titles on the line. Again, do you think this fight is closer than this one then? Or do you agree with Greg in that respect, or do you disagree?
Hey, mate, thanks for having me on. So I do agree with Greg. I think this is a tighter fight. I think the one in 2015 wasn't that competitive. I know Whyte had a bit of success. I think it might have been the 3rd round, maybe. But apart from that, Joshua won every round. It wasn't a hugely competitive fight, in my opinion. I think this time it's a tough question to ask to answer because of Joshua's performance against Franklin. He looked so different to the Joshua that beat Dillian Whyte 8 years ago. And with Dillian Whyte, I don't think many people know what Dillian Whyte has left. He's not looked great for a while now. He's not super old for a heavyweight. So I think it's a tough question to ask. But yeah, in answer to your question, I do think it's a closer fight than it was in 2015.
Let me just pick you up on there. We've obviously mentioned, Greg, you and Greg both alluded to this sense of Joshua being potentially different in style than he was obviously in 2015, and there's been talk of obviously him transitioning, as Greg said there, style-wise, and we've seen in the build-up to this, AJ be quite critical of Robert McCracken and the fact that he didn't necessarily felt that he learnt defence and that, essentially that he was porous in that respect. But the style of this fight, obviously we're used to AJ being very dominant and being a sort of KO artist in that way, but then if you look obviously at his record, he hasn't actually stopped anyone that credible. I'm not counting Pulev for some time. Dillian Whyte with 19 stoppages on his record out of 29. The style of this fight, Stotty, I'll come to you first here with this. Do you think it's going to be an anti-Joshua that's going to come forward and it's to stop Dillian Whyte? Do you think we're going to see some of the same hesitancy? And how do you think Dillian Whyte would approach it?
So I was lucky enough to be at the press conference for this fight a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't help but compare it to the press conference for the Jermaine Franklin fight. When the Jermaine Franklin fight was announced, I think back in late February, early March. Franklin press conference, Joshua looked like he didn't want to be there. He was quite grumpy. Maybe it was jet lagged, I don't know, but he didn't look like a happy fighter. Whereas the press conference a couple of weeks ago, Joshua did look quite happy to be there, looked like he was enjoying himself, seemed in better spirits. I wonder if how he was at those two press conferences may have a difference on what he's like on the night. I think Joshua knows he can't afford to have another Jermaine Franklin-like performance where he's tentative and doesn't really want to throw punches and just looks a bit scared. because I think if he does that, just like his stock will just go down even more. The belief in him beating a Wilder or a Fury goes down even more. So I really hope he's going to go in there and just we're going to see glimpses of the old Joshua. I really do think that he's with a top quality coach and he's with an opponent that is going to light the fire, like Jermaine Franklin didn't do. So I think that's what Joshua's going to do. If I'm Dillian Whyte, I'm hoping he goes in there and just has a go. And I'm hoping he goes in there and says, this is going to last 3 or 4 rounds. It's me or you. And I think that's his best chance. I don't think he's going to try and fight southpaw like he did against Tyson Fury. I don't think he's going to try and outpoint Anthony Joshua. I think he's going to go in there and have a go, which should make for a really exciting fight.
Right, Greg, I'll come to you as well. We're not going to obviously talk predictions at this stage, but just when it comes to a question really on the style of the fight, again, do you agree with Stotty there in the sense that AJ needs to put on a bit of performance? Do you expect him to be more dominant and more sort of on the front foot and essentially taking more risks? Or do you think he'll stay hesitant and stay in this kind of odd transitional defensive boxing approach that he seems to be adopting? And when it comes to Dillian Whyte, again, do you agree with Stotty that essentially we've seen him tire in fights previously, we've seen him get hurt in fights previously, that he essentially should just be banging his chin with his gloves, biting down the gum shield and going, look, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 rounds. I'm just going to give it everything. If I go out, I'll go out. How do you see the style of the fight?
Yeah, Elliot, I actually do agree with Elliot Stott with a lot of what he says there, but I feel a bit all over the place with like what way the fight could go. I think Joshua needs to come out, go on the front foot, get behind a solid jab, put Dillian Whyte on the back foot, hit him hard and stop him. And I think he could stop him quicker than the last time if he does that effectively. And that sounds bizarre, I know, because I'm saying that I think the fight is a closer fight this time, but that's based on what Joshua's shown these last few fights that we think that that's closer. And I also think that the knockouts that Dillian Whyte's had to Joshua, Fury and Povetkin, they've got to be a little bit taxing. And I think that it could be more susceptible to getting hurt easier in this fight, which means it could go quicker. But I do think it'll be a good fight. I think I agree with what Elliot Stott says, where Whyte just needs to come out and say he's had a go, but I think that can make him get knocked over quicker. So, yeah, I think if I'm Joshua, I'm training Joshua, you're telling him to do the fundamentals correctly, but be a little bit more aggressive. Come out and go behind a 1-2, a 1-2 left hook, keep walking him down, and you know you're going to get to him. Don't change too much in who you are. Let's be honest, Joshua didn't look too bad in his career. Even when he lost against Andy Ruiz, if he was just a little bit more patient in that fight, he would have probably bossed Andy Ruiz the first time, but he got greedy. And that's where he needs to find the balance. So, yeah, I think it's a really intriguing fight all round, guys. I really do, for a number of reasons.
Let me just pick you up on this, Greg, because you're been a fight yourself previously. You've had a fight recently, which you came through and won as well. But I just want to ask you, if you're training Dillian Whyte, how are you? Obviously, we've seen him, like Stotty mentioned there, we've seen him come out and do the old southpaw dance with Tyson Fury, oddly, which took us by surprise. Didn't really take anyone else in the ring by surprise. Fury obviously stopped him. But how would you advise Dillian Whyte to go about this? Like tactically, how would you think we would get to AJ? Obviously, a lot of people are talking about sort of Hail Mary punch that might go through. But if you can give us maybe something a bit more of a sort of trainers and a sort of analytical perspective, how would you coach him towards victory here?
Elliot, I think he's got to stay close to Joshua and make it horrible for him. Don't have too much distance between the both of you where Joshua can extend his arms and hurt you with the power that he has. I know we questioned the power a little bit there, but there is power there. Maybe at a certain level where you're fighting really supreme fighters like Usyk, they know how to kind of read the shots a little bit better. But I think Dillian Whyte needs to make it a little bit ugly, stay close to Joshua, swing hooks and body shots inside and just really disgruntle him. I think if he does that, Joshua could get wild, and it's not beyond the question that Whyte could catch him. But if he stands at distance, he'd be as well going home. I think he's got to stay close to Joshua and really work his body and test his temperament, because sometimes I look at Joshua Elliott and I think he's got this little bit of entitlement about him, as if you'll fight how I think you should fight because do you know who I am? I'm Anthony Joshua. Make it ugly for him, stay close, and I think that's Dillian Whyte's best shot.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to come to you. It's a bit of a different question before we go into kind of I kind of, I suppose, what's next for both men, win or lose? We'll start with this question here, which is slightly different. And there's for you, do you think Dillian Whyte, Greg has alluded to some of the victories he's had there, obviously Povetkin rematch. Rivas, not a bad win, actually, considering that obviously the fast hands that he presented in that fight. The Chisora victories when Chisora was a more of a live opponent. Obviously fought Parker as well, Lucas Brown. I think what you want about Lucas Brown. But do you think at this stage of both men's career, is this essentially a fight for closure for Dillian Whyte? Do you reckon this is one last cash out? Do you think this would be the best performance or the best win on his record? Given, but then obviously balancing that off with where AJ is currently. I mean, yeah, where do you see this fight for Dillian Whyte? We've seen him chasing fights with different heavyweights around the globe, essentially. Is this one last cash out? Is the main question I want to put to you.
I don't think it's one last cash out. I think this is the best fight possible for Dillian Whyte. It's the most money he's going to make by some margin compared to the other fights that were possible. He is 36 now. He's kind of been knocked out a couple of times. They've been bad knockouts as well, obviously, especially that Povetkin one. But no, I think if Whyte loses this, I think he will crack on and continue to search for more paydays. Whether that's the third Chisora fight or if you can look at the top kind of 15 heavyweights, he could try and pose as some sort of gatekeeper for someone who's up and coming, like a Daniel Dubois, possibly next year when Daniel Dubois probably loses to Usyk. But no, yeah, I feel like Dillian Whyte's got that kind of character where he doesn't want to he wants to keep going and get more paydays and make more money, basically. So no, I don't think if Whyte loses, this will be his last fight.
That leads us beautifully into this segue, which is the next question. We'll come to you, Gregory. So this is a kind of where do they go, win or lose? So obviously there's been talk, hasn't there, previously around a sort of heavyweight super event for the winner going in potentially into the Wilder fight. I suppose the question I'm going to ask you really is, should either of them win? Do you see that Wilder fight happening? But I suppose interestingly, another question would be for both men, and give us a little summary of what you think they're going to do. Should they both lose? Where does AJ go? Where does Whyte go if they lose? Like I started to allude to there, will there be gatekeeper fights? Will there be retirement? If you just give us a quick summary of whether you see the Wilder fight happening and where you see both men going if they lose.
Yeah, Elliot, I think there's too much money on the table. I think that I can see the Wilder fight happening, especially for Joshua if he comes through. I think there's a fortune to be made out there. So that's a fight I do actually think will happen. The loser, I'm going to be honest, there's a part of me that thinks Anthony Joshua might call it a day if he loses. Whereas I agree with Elliot Stott, and I'm not so sure Dillian Whyte would. If I'm advising Dillian Whyte, I think the smartest fight for him if he loses is go for the third Derek Chisora fight. Don't let Eddie Hearn give you money to get in with guys like Hrgovic or let, I don't know, Wasserman or Sky give you money to get in with someone like Martin Bacoli. Go for a fight that is going to probably generate the most money, and that probably would be Chisora. I think people would pay to see that. I really do. So yeah, I think Joshua retires if he loses, and I think Dillian Whyte will fight maybe Derek Chisora again, and I do think that the Wilder fight will happen at the end of the year.
Elliot, so you mentioned that you don't think this will be Dillian Whyte's last fight should he lose. So we could just pick up again on the same questions really. Do you reckon that the Wilder fight will happen for both men, either man, so whoever wins? But what about AJ as well? If AJ loses, where do you see him going? Do you agree with Greg that he might go into retirement, or do you think he'll fight on as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if Joshua loses, then that's it. I think it's going to be hard to rebuild. And I think Joshua now, we can still say, lost to Ruiz, beat him in the rematch, and he's lost to Usyk, and Usyk's an elite, incredible fighter. He's still in a pretty good position if he retires, and those are the only losses on his record, whereas a loss to Dillian Whyte would be hard to come back from. In terms of the Wilder fight, I hope so. I wouldn't kind of guarantee it with anyone. It sounds promising, doesn't it? I'm a bit confused over what's happening with Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz. Those rumours seem to be on or off. I feel like Deontay Wilder needs to have a fight because he's fought one round last year, and that was against Hellenius. So, yeah, I think there's a good chance that if Joshua wins, he'll fight Wilder next. If Dillian Whyte wins, I don't know. Deontay Wilder doesn't have to fight Dillian Whyte. So I wouldn't kind of guarantee that if that happens.
Let me just give you a quick, both of you are going to answer this, but a quick yes or no answer to this one. I don't spend too much long on it. But do you think either of these fighters, like you said, Dillian Whyte's 36, AJ's 33, Stotty, will come to you. Do you think that either of them will become a world champion again? Well, I say again. Do you think Josh will become world champion again, or Dillian Whyte could become world champion if they fight on, if the belts fragment, or if there's any way that'll happen, or do you think that won't happen for either of them?
I think if Joshua hangs around, I don't want to sound rude, but like if Joshua kind of hangs around 3 or 4 years and waits for certain fighters to retire, then he might still have a chance. But I don't think he's got an interest in doing that, and I don't think he beats the likes of Usyk, Fury, or Wilder now. So it's a no from me.
Gregory Doyle, do you think either of these two will become a world champion again, or for the first time?
I think I've got a pretty similar answer to Elliot Stott. I think if Joshua sticks about and the right opportunities present themselves, I think, yeah, he could, but it really all depends what happens. If Tyson Fury goes into another hiatus, or if Usyk beats Dubois in Poland and just decides he's going to call it a day if the Fury fight can't get made, I think he could win another world title, but it needs to be the right fight. I don't see him beating Fury or Usyk at the moment. Wilder, I think it's a toss-up. I think if Joshua hit Wilder, it would hurt him. And I think vice versa. So it's a very, very hard fight to kind of toss up that one, because I think it's just a matter of who lands first.
Thank you very much. Well, lads, we have come to this time now. We've flirted and skirted around it somewhat, but we are now at prediction time. And Greg, I'm going to start with you now. You're a man who's quite elusive when it comes to predictions. You like to, sometimes drop back on the ropes and slip and slide. But I want to ask you first and foremost, who do you think is going to win? But also, how? I mean, obviously you can talk about as much as you want about the style of the fight, but do you think it'll be a knockout? Do you think it'll be points? How do you see it playing out, please?
I don't know why, Elliot, but I just feel Joshua between 4 and 8. I think he'll just get him. I think Dillian Whyte's not the same fighter, and I know that Joshua hasn't really been performing, but I just think he's more susceptible to getting hit, Dillian Whyte, and I think anything between 4 and 8, I think Joshua will take him out.
Elliot Starr, are we going 2 for 2? Do you think an anti-Joshua KO is on the cards here? And if so, which round range would you like to select for that, please?
Yeah, to be honest, like if you ask me a question now, ask me a question tomorrow, you might get 2 different answers. I'm concerned it could be another Jermaine Franklin sort of performance, which I just think would be incredibly disappointing, because that fight, it wasn't an entertaining fight. It wasn't what people kind of bought in for, and that's my concern. However, I'll go back to kind of Joshua's spirits in the 2 press conferences, and he does seem more himself now. So I'm going to stay positive and say that we are going to see glimpses of the old Anthony Joshua. I think this is a good fight for him opponent wise. I think Dillian Whyte is a bit over the hill. So I will go for Joshua to stop Dillian Whyte, and I'm going to go rounds 8 or 9. If I had to give you a precise prediction, that's my one.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna refuse to stay on the fence entirely. I'm here myself. I'm going to say that AJ will also stop Dillian Whyte. I actually agree with you, Stotty. I actually think it will be a negative performance early doors, but I think that Dillian Whyte won't actually have the conditioning to actually last as long as Jermaine Franklin, and will just get tired and will just get stopped in what could actually be kind of not a tragic affair, but an affair where both people sit there and think Deontay Wilder, if he gets up for this fight, would flatten both of them. Guys, thank you very much for joining me. I'll just speak to our viewers one more time here when I say, look, we've got other content coming up from this fight week as well. We'll have previews and reviews. We'll have written content, interviews with other fighters, undercard fighters as well. We've obviously got, shorter form and longer form content, so check out the channel for those. Elliot Starr, thank you very much for joining me. Gregory Doyle, thank you very much for joining me. And guys who are watching, thank you very much, as always. Leave in the comments whether you agree with us or disagree with us. And until next time, thank you very much.